Monster Hunter. I'll be honest, it's a franchise that I've tried time and time again to get into, or to even try to understand. As someone who's observed it from the outside, you go around fighting massive monsters with people and carve parts to make better weapons and armor. It looked pretty cool, so once in a while I'll pick up a game and try it out. Whether it was Freedom 2, 4 Ultimate, World, or even Rise, I was never able to stick with it long enough to get invested. The most consistent that I've been with any of the Monster Hunter titles is Monster Hunter Now, but that's a mobile title. With the announcement of the newest entry in the series, Monster Hunter Wilds, I made the choice to give the series another shot. As a bit of a side note, I was able to guess this game the moment it was announced at the Game Awards in 2023.
I want to say Monster Hunter, but I don't think that's true. I just saw that enemy as like Monster Hunter. I think I am right. It's a brand new Monster Hunter game. Monster Hunter Wilds. Okay.
I just thought I'd bring that up. It's pretty funny. Back to the game, there were 3 opportunities for people to try it out before it's released with the open beta test. I played it and thought it was cool, even if it was a bit limited on features. That's where today's video comes in. Originally, it was going to be about how fun the beta was, and I would encourage people to try it out for themselves. But then an opportunity presented itself to me, and I went for it. This is where I have to thank Capcom, because I was given early access to Monster Hunter Wilds, with my platform of choice being on Xbox. Though the platform does not matter, as this is the first game to include full crossplay compatibility. More on that later. I wasn't able to get as much time as I would have wanted with this game, but that was due to obligations on my end getting way out of control. Fortunately, I was able to get a good idea of the game and what it had to offer. This isn't really a full review or anything, but it's more of what I noticed with the game, what I got out of it, and kind of a first impression. With that said, I think it would be better if I stayed a little light on story bits, so that way you can all experience it yourself. Anyways, is Monster Hunter Wilds worth picking up? I mean, judging by the title of this video, I think you know the answer, but let's talk about it anyway. The game begins with creating your own hunter and feline companion, also known as a palico. These things tend to be very intimidating for me, but there's plenty to work with. If you've played any of the beta test sessions, then you can transfer your palico and hunter to the full game, so you don't have to worry about recreating them. Thankfully, you can make edits to them as well, which is good because I goofed on the pitch of the voice, and my hunter started to sound like the supply drop robot from Call of Duty Infinite Warfare.
It's safe now. Now that's a supply drop.
You start on this massive ship, but you're immediately hit with a flashback. This basically shows you being recruited by a higher-up to investigate the Forbidden Lands and to protect a group called the Keepers, who are currently being threatened by a beast that had once believed to be extinct. This briefing also introduces us to Alma, our guide, and Nata, a young boy who claims to be one of the Keepers, who was lost from his village. We're also introduced to Gemma after the flashback, but all of this is interrupted by a group of agitated monsters chasing a little girl on a sacred, these bird creatures. After saving her, we find out that her brother is hiding from a Chatacabra, one of the early monsters in the game. Our duo helps them back to their village, and this is where the game lets us go to help Nata go back to his village. And this is where I kind of want to stop the story segment, because all of this has been explained in the open beta test, and because the game just released, I'd rather you go and experience it for yourself. What I will add is that you are traveling in a big group, but only a few characters are active in the story, and some will have in-game use that I can get into later. Same goes for locations. Like other titles in the main series, Monster Hunter Wilds is an action RPG where players take on different missions to progress through the game, but can also craft better and better equipment, either as a solo player or in groups. The devs have made it even easier to group with people thanks to the cross-play compatibility, which is something I didn't really get to experience in the full game, but I did get to try it out in the open beta tests. Most of the weapons will have similar gameplay, that being a strong attack, a weaker attack, and avoiding damage can be done through either dodging or blocking, though that one depends on a few factors. Do you have a shield? Then blocking might be something you'll be doing more often. If your weapon is heavier, then you'll need to compensate for the lack of mobility. Dodging will not make you invincible because it relies on you moving in the right direction. So you can try to dodge, but you'll still take damage because you rolled into an attack. But if you get the timing just right, you'll be able to execute a perfect dodge, which will give you buffs depending on whatever weapon you're using. It also gives you invincibility from that specific attack. A perfect block exists as well, and I only really got this with the gun lance. It led to me shooting this massive explosive attack at the enemy, and honestly, that was just really cool. I've always loved the weapons that allow for better mobility, so I went with the dual blades. It was kind of my weapon of choice. This allowed me to attack swiftly, but also use the demon mode to allow for extra combos, though I could never really figure out the best time to execute them. Sometimes I'll go for it, and then I'll just undo my demon mode ability. As I got a bit further into playing the open beta and the full game, I came across the insect glaive. After a bit of practice, I found this to be the best possible weapon for me to use, in terms of mobility, reach, and the chance of mounting enemies. This lets the player ride a larger monster to stab it and do more damage to create a wound. These spots will act as the monster's weak points and can be exploited to collect more parts from them. Honestly, the controls are pretty good, though I had some issues that made it tough to want to try other weapons. Some of the heaviest weapons have the shortest distance for dodging, which for me was very unappealing. Another one is when I do a focus strike while mounting a monster, my weapon is put away, so trying to get back into the battle after doing a lot of damage took a little bit longer than I would have liked. I would have preferred if I just kept my weapon out. Though I will say it is very satisfying to pull off combos or to pull off a focus strike, so the game has that going for it. Now that I am talking about fighting, for melee weapon users, don't think you can just hack at these enemies endlessly. At some point, you're going to have to sharpen your blade using a whetstone. Just like Rise in World, the whetstone can be used as many times as you'd like, and just like Rise, you can sharpen your weapon while riding the Sacred. Speaking of the Sacred, you can also attack while riding it, or launch yourself to perform a stronger attack, or potentially mount it. There are many ways to start a battle, so it's worth playing around to see what works best for you. Though I prefer to just jump into a battle like a madman. It's okay, I've also realized that that's not the greatest strategy all the time. The open beta found a way to humble me a bit. The Sacred is also how players can carry around a second weapon to take into battle. You can only switch them while you're riding the Sacred, but I think this is a really cool addition to the series. I chose to take a bow with me so that way I can use my insect glaive for close-up attacks and I can use the bow for ranged attacks. Though the range of this and the two bow guns is pitiful. I could totally understand if this was done for the sake of balance because I'm pretty sure these would be very overpowered early on. The Sacred can also let players automatically move to their objective so that they may tend to things like sharpening a weapon or even setting up items to start a fight. There will be moments where it seems like the game has no idea which path to take, so you're going to have to take control once in a while. And don't think playing solo means that you're completely on your own. Your trusted Palico is there to fight alongside you, and you can tell it how to act in battle. I had mine set to healing priority so I don't have to switch the potions all the time, but that doesn't mean they won't attack, set traps, or distract monsters. The Palico is probably one of the most effective teammates that I've ever had. Anyway, back to the healing. Due to my inexperience, it is something I had to get used to. Not just using normal and mega potions, but also navigating the item wheel. And I know there's another method to accessing items through shortcuts, but I found the item wheel at the bottom right of the screen to be a bit more intuitive. For the most part. The Palico isn't the only character that you can rely on for assistance. In fact, you can send an SOS flare to bring in supporter hunters and make tougher monsters much easier to manage. Other players can join your mission through finding active quests through Alma. I wasn't able to try out the online multiplayer for the full game, so the only experience I had is with the open beta test, which means I don't have a whole lot to say on it. What I can talk about is the method to inviting people to a lobby. It's a bit of a process, though I chalk that up to syncing up the game world as well. I'm surprised there's no way to take your party with you and join a larger lobby, though I feel like that's something that could be implemented at a later date. Then again, that could be a nightmare to implement and they just don't want to do it. Either way, I'm totally fine with it. Something that can get a little annoying with these fights is how often monsters will flee. It's not uncommon for them to flee at certain stages of a fight, but in Monster Hunter Wilds, unless I manage to be extremely overpowered, they tend to flee at least 2 or 3 times per fight. It's probably because I would prefer to wrap up the fight when it gets a little too long, or wanting to wrap up an easier fight to get the parts that I'm seeking. Either way, it's because I'm impatient. There are ways to stop them in their tracks, but it's better to just follow them to their nest or wherever they end up. That is, unless you're on the sand dunes. Fighting Raydao and Bahalara have to be pretty annoying because those sand dunes will make your attacks difficult to line up. It works both ways because enemies will have a harder time hitting you as well, but their attacks cover more ground, so I find this to be annoying at times. In the starting area, a thunderstorm can occur to agitate enemies and possibly strike the player. Side note, it actually took a Capcom employee to bring that up. Yes, you can be struck by lightning in the game. I just ran through fights without a care in the world, and I had no idea that was a possibility. Weather effects can also affect movement and stamina, but they can be countered with specific drinks or other foods that can temporarily increase stamina. It's not a huge problem, and it's not like all environments are detrimental to your quests, as some fights can lead to you dropping large structures on enemies, doing a lot of damage. Even if you're not doing damage, you can set up traps to give yourself more opportunities to do a lot of damage in a short period of time, without the monster retaliating. There is one more mechanic that I didn't really pay attention to, but you can capture monsters. This requires trapping the monster after it starts crawling away, which is near the end of the fight. Then you have to put it to sleep, and once you do, the monster is captured. I didn't think I'd get this one down as fast as I did, but here we are. As you collect more parts from monsters and other sources throughout the map, you can take them to Gemma and craft new weapons and armor, or upgrade existing equipment. Aside from the increase of attack or defense, they may include benefits like having better critical hit damage or have elemental resistance, or do elemental damage. Some effects take place if you equipped all armor from one set, such as this one I had that allows me to mount monsters a lot easier. Pairing that up with the insect glaive felt really busted, but it was so cool to experiment and see what worked and what didn't. One of the things I was foolishly concerned about was this large area. I thought that was it. But if you've seen Monster Hunter or games that are inspired by Monster Hunter, then you can see why I call my concern foolish. Of course there are more locations, but the areas are much larger than what it was in games like Monster Hunter Rise. That's the only game I can refer to since that's the one I've made the most progress in prior to this video. Since I'm going over the visuals, I think it's as good of a time as any to mention that I'm playing this on an Xbox, which comes with graphic options. You can go with something that looks a lot nicer, something that has a smoother frame rate, or something in the middle. With a game like this, I prioritized frame rate, which stayed consistent for the most part. Very rarely will the frame rate drop, and when it did, it was when it was transitioning from gameplay to a cutscene. If I could nitpick a little bit longer, I could say that the in-game engine cutscenes struggle to match the voice acting. I played the game in English, so the facial animations could be synced up to the Japanese language. It was just really odd seeing Gemma or Alma excited for something only for their movements to not match it. Speaking of Gemma, I did notice that her face seemed to be a bit frozen at times. It got a little more unsettling the more I noticed it. Though it could be because the animations occur in-engine, but somebody who knows more about this probably has the answer I'm looking for. Nitpicks aside, the game looks really good. I had my doubts with the starting area being in the desert, but those doubts immediately went away when I got through the game's first chapter. The sound is the same old Monster Hunter goodness players have come to expect. Loud orchestral scores for monster fights, and the different camps have some great music to fit it as well. Really, the best part of the audio has to be the sound effects. There's just so much weight to each attack, and it really brings the game together. I'm not an audio aficionado, but I know solid sound design when I hear it, which actually sounds very pretentious. Look, audio is good, end of story. And that's what I was able to get from the time that I had to spend with the game. Again, I wish I was able to play more of it to experiment with other weapons and armor sets, but what I played was more than enough to say that I understand the appeal of the series. I'm not a big story person, but don't take that as a knock at the story. I just found the gameplay loop to be more interesting. Hunting monsters, crafting equipment out of their parts, and going to hunt again sounds like a lot of uninteresting busy work when you view it from the outside. But when I got into it, it made hours feel like minutes. I would go in and hunt monsters so I can get one last part so I can make a full armor set, or I can make something powerful to go slap around a monster that gave me trouble earlier in the chapter. It was just a really good feeling, and I had no idea this was an experience that I was missing. I'm sure the social aspect is even better, but again, the closest I got to it was playing the open beta test. But I'm gonna have a lot more time to experience it now since the game just released. In fact, on my second channel, I'm actually going to be streaming the game from the very beginning. And if I could be real with you, this actually makes me want to go and boot up the game right now just so I could keep playing it because, I don't know, I'm hooked. I'm addicted to this. This is something that I didn't think I was going to be this hooked on, but I'm sold on it. I mean, hell, I might even go back to some of the older games, but because Monster Hunter Wilds is the newest one, that might happen sometime in the future. Although I'm having a lot of fun with the game, that doesn't mean that the introduction that I had to it wasn't very bumpy. It was. I struggled to fight, I struggled to get used to how certain attack patterns worked, and I still do to this day. But it felt like that bumpy experience at the start was worth going through so I can better understand the game. I don't claim to completely understand all of the game's mechanics. I just know enough to know that I'm having a good time with it, and I think that'll just about do it because I have nothing else to say. Hey everyone, thank you for checking out this first impression video on Monster Hunter Wilds. I know it's a little bit rambly at times, but honestly, I had no idea where else I was going to talk about stuff, so I just get all my opinions out there. And you have no idea how badly I wanted to say that I was working on this video. Are you going to play Monster Hunter Wilds? Are you looking forward to it? Are you a fan of the series? Or is this game not really your cup of tea? Let me know in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and share it around to the people that you know. At this time, I want to give a shout out to the supporters of my channel. These are the ones who have been supporting monetarily. The Chaos tier members have their names scrolling on screen, but the Super tier members pay for a verbal shout out. They are Dalton Furry and Jimmy Duke STR. If you'd like to support the channel with a monthly contribution, you can do so with the join button below this video, or go over to patreon.com/GottaBeFrank. Lowest tier is $1, and I thank you for your extra support. Again, I have the second channel linked below, as well as the Sunset City podcast. You should definitely check that out. And you can find my social medias as well, linked in the description. With that said, I hope you all have a wonderful and safe day. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, take care. Bye-bye.